All right, so in this one, we are going to be using Python requests to open up a website within Python, not a browser, but this is taking over URL lib2 to handle all the HTTP capabilities you might need. Python requests is awesome. It's really useful for all types of things. In this case, we are just going to be opening up a web page. And then after we open up that web page, we are going to parse the data from that web page to extract information that we want. And we're going to do that using Beautiful Soup. Another way to think of this is called web scraping. So scraping data from a website and using that data, or at least saving that data using Python. Now, something to note with scraping data, a lot of times there is what's called an API that allows you to interact with that data anyways. But if there's not an API and you want to do some research, or you want to learn more about some particular service or some data set, scraping data is often very good for that. Especially like search engines scrape website data to get the links, all the links that they would need for any particular website, and it would turn those links into relevant searches for people and keywords and all types of stuff that you can use to scrape data with. In this case, we're going to do it to collect specific data, and that data is going to be coming from yellowpages.com. Now, I do not suggest that you use Yellow Pages data in any app whatsoever without their permission, because I don't believe they have an API. If they do now, that's different than what I've used before, but using their data can be illegal. So what we're doing here is specifically using their data for educational purposes only. I do not recommend that you use their data without their permission. I'm only showing you how to do it so you can actually pull data, and they have a nice format to follow through to actually pull data and extract it and use it as you might need for other services and all that. So this is specifically for an example. Again, I don't recommend that you use their data. I recommend that you use it as a learning tool and a way to improve the projects that you're working on right now. Now, that being said, let's actually get into it. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is, of course, mention and acknowledge that every website has a specific structure to that website. Now, it doesn't mean that every website is going to be the same, because every HTML, people write code differently, essentially. So let's actually look at yellowpages.com. In this case, I did a quick search for coffee in Los Angeles. If you do this search, hopefully your data would be similar. It might be a little bit different based on all different types of context that they might take into account. Like your ad might be different than my ad, or your actual listings might be different than mine, depending on where you are in the world, how often you search, all this stuff that comes into it. But that's not really the point. What we need to look at here is the structure of this data. So I'm going to go ahead and view the page source so we can just talk about this structure real quick. Right off the bat, there's a lot of stuff that I just really don't need, so I'm going to keep scrolling down into the body content. Actually, this is kind of a mess, so I'm going to close this out and instead do inspect element. So control and then inspect element. In the inspect element, what we see here is we have info, and it looks like this info right here is everything that we would need for Coffee Co. There is a thumbnail too, but we are going to just be going off of that info. So let's actually collapse that one, and let's look at the next one and see if info is the reoccurring pattern. In this case, I see info again. So this is good. We see that div class of info seems to be the actual info that we get from where the info that we want is under div class info. So that means that we can actually pull this data. And after looking at two of them, I'm going to say it's safe to assume that all of them are going to be like that. Now, you could go through and look at each one to double check to make sure that div class of info is actually holding all of the data for the title, the address, the ratings, the category there, website, more info. I'm going to go ahead and assume that. Now, with that assumption, I'm going to actually test it out using code instead of going manually and looking at each one. But I will keep this inspect element open because we might need to grab that data again, or at least reference that data again. So I'm going to leave it open for now, and I'm also going to eventually copy this URL. So going back into Python requests, we need to install Python requests. So you can go to their installation. You can just follow along with this. In this case, I'm going to install it on my general computer. You can also install it on a virtual environment, but in this case, I'm just doing my general computer. So I'll do sudo pip install requests, and I'll just do upgrade just in case. And then, of course, my super user password. If you're on Windows, you likely all you have to do is pip install requests, or if you're in virtual environment, pip install requests will work too. I do already have it installed, so that's okay. And then Beautiful Soup, it's going to be the same thing, and we look for installing Beautiful Soup. This is, of course, the same with pretty much any package that you want to work with in Python. And we see pip install Beautiful Soup 4. That's the version we're going to be using. There are other versions of Beautiful Soup, so if you see other code using Beautiful Soup, they might be using Beautiful Soup 3, and that will be indicated by how they import it. So if it doesn't import it the same way as I do here shortly, then you'll want to use Beautiful Soup 3 specifically for whatever example that you're going to be using. Of course, in this case, we're going to be using Beautiful Soup 4, so sudo pip install Beautiful Soup 4, and if I need to upgrade it, I can upgrade it like that. It's already satisfied because I've already upgraded it. Now I can do Python. I'm going into the Python interpreter here, or excuse me, the Python shell, and we need to import requests and Beautiful Soup. Each import is relatively straightforward. The first one is just import requests. Make sure there's the S at the end. It is request, it's not request. And then from BS4, import Beautiful Soup. So this tutorial is not going to go too much into depth on either one of those libraries. We're just going to be working with them together. So now what we need is the request. We need to make a request. So I'm going to set the variable R. It can be any variable you'd like, just as long as it's not conflicting with any other variable or function name. And R equals to requests.get, and then I need some URL here. And so I will grab the URL from Yellow Pages. I'm going to copy this, and in this we will paste it in and press enter. Request, oops, I spelled it wrong, so let's try that again. R requests.get, and there we go. Press enter. All right, so now it took a second to load, and that's because it's loading that actual data. Now that data is on our computer and we can work with it. So if I do r.content and press enter, I see all of the HTML content. I can keep scrolling up and see it. It's not very usable for me right now. So this is where Beautiful Soup comes in. Beautiful Soup can make it very useful for me. So I'm going to go off of what their tutorial says, is just call soup equals to Beautiful Soup. And it would normally take in some HTML content here as a string. Now we already have HTML content, and that was in the form of r.content. So request.content gives us back the HTML content related to that specific request. So what this is doing is converting it into something usable by Beautiful Soup. So if I hit enter, it's now usable by Beautiful Soup. So if I hit print soup.printify and hit enter, it actually cleans up the code and makes it a little bit easier to read, even easier to read than when I did view page source. So if I go to view page source, it's easier to read than even this. And this is what Chrome is sending back, right? So you can already see that if I scroll all the way to the bottom of HTML, you see that it's just a little bit easier to read than even that, which is pretty nice, right? So that's a cool start, but what does that do for me? Not a whole lot. So let's actually try out a few things. I'm going to do soup.find all, and remember soup is the variable that we set to Beautiful Soup, the class that we created this function with, and I want to find all A, so A as in links, so anchor tags, all tags of A, and I press enter. It now gives me a list. We can see by the closing brackets at the end and then commas. It gives me all of these links, tons of links. Well, that's kind of cool. So what if I mean, it's also not that beautiful in this case, but what if I wanted to see all the links, but specifically the href or the hyperlink for it? that's going to be fairly straightforward. So let's do a loop for all these links because it's a list. So we'll do for link in soup.findAll, and we'll do the anchor tag, and then of course space in, print link, and I'll just hit enter for now. And it separates it onto lines, which works out okay. But again, we wanted just that href, so let's do that again. And we'll do, this time, we'll do link.get, and we'll do href. And we press enter a couple times. Here we go. So now it's showing us the links, the href itself. If I printed it out instead of just that, so let's do print link.get href. This will give me back a string instead of the Unicode. It's now showing me all the different links. Hey, that's kind of cool, right? So this is actually every single link that I would want. But what if I did something a little bit different and I print link.text? This is now showing me all of the text for each individual link throughout the entire page, right? So it's giving me everything on the page, everything that has a link tag. So let's make it look a little bit better. So for link in, or actually I can just press up a couple times, and then I'll do print link.text and link.get href. So now I can see the link text and then the link itself. And of course you could do some more stuff to it, right? So we could use string substitution, and we'll just say, we'll put the actual HTML in here. So %s, I'm gonna have to use single quotes here. So double quote, a href equals to single quote, %s, single quote, then %s, and then a, double quotes, and then %, and then we'll do a dot get, or excuse me, sorry, link dot get href, and then link dot text, and it's giving me all the actual links as the way I wanted. I removed all the classes and all this stuff, and now I have this link working, and it's actually showing me stuff. So in some cases we have some errors here. So the data is not going to be perfect, right? So these are relative links to the page that it's on. So it's not always going to work out perfectly. Just keep that in mind, because it's not an API. It has not been designed for us to pull the data from it. But since it's a web page and it is public, right? So any web page is public, we can pull that data. Now, if it was password protected, there would be more steps that we would need to take to make this happen. And also, if it is password protected, it might be limited to what you can actually pull from it. So keep that in mind too. So now that we have this, let's actually just go ahead and make a reference page in Sublime Text. I already have this open. I'm just going to type it all out again though, so you guys can do it with me. So import requests, and then from bs4 import beautiful soup. And then what we did before was r equals to requests.get, and then we got a URL. So let's actually add the URL as a variable. That way we can change it whenever. And then I did soup equals to beautiful soup of r.content. All right, so let's grab that URL, go back in here, copy this, and paste that there. All right, so now we have the URL, and if we did this, we could do what we already did was soup.findAll, and we got all the links. So if I did for link in soup actually I'll set this equal to a variable, so links equals to soup.findAll, so we don't have to keep typing it. So for link in links, we could do print, and I'll do the string substitution again, href, %s, and %s, then a, and then link.get href and link.text. All right, so what I just did was do exactly what we did. So I just have it as a reference, so I can copy this, paste it in, and we get all of that stuff all over again. And of course, in here, you could say if HTTP in link, then we'll print it out. Otherwise, it's not going to print. So what this would allow us to do, if we copy that, is just make it nice and clean. So we can definitely make sure that, oh, whoops, we want link.get href, not just link. So we want it actually in the link, the whole thing. So if I copy that and place it there, this will make sure that it's giving us the absolute links that are actually in there. So if none type is not iterable, so in some cases it's not going to actually show us this, because if there's not a link, we might have some errors in how this actually works. So I'm just gonna leave that out for now, but it's just something to note that you could use a try or accept. But I want to get a little bit more advanced, so I don't want to spend too much time on how we could do that part. I actually want to go back and get that info, the specific info that we wanted, which was in this div class of info. So it's pretty cool on how we're going to do that. So just like in last time we did find all, well, this A is for any HTML tag. So it could be P, it could be div, it could be anything. So let's actually find, well, I'll just call it G data, so for general data. And then I'll do soup.findAll, and we're going to do div. But as we notice, is it has a class of info. So I can actually add in class and then info. So there's a parameter, so any HTML parameter in here could be there. So item type and some item type, or any data analytics or ID, you can replace these things with that. But in this case, of course, classes are used multiple times, so info works. And it's going to get it if there is two classes as well. So if it was like in here, we will see info section and info secondary. If you just said info section, it would still get the same data. It wouldn't. It would kind of look for at least the class that represents that. So you can play around with this, and let's actually just copy that, and then in our terminal, we'll paste it in, and we'll print G data, and we see this nice long list of stuff. So this is pretty cool. So this just gave us all of our content for the phone stuff, but this is kind of hard to read. So let's actually create a for loop for it. So for item in G data, we are going to print item.text. All right, so let's copy that, and we'll paste it in here, and we see that it's coming through. So we have all the different stuff. So we have cafe, and then it says menu, and then 15, and then this looks like an address, and then we've got a city, a state, a zip code, and then a phone number. We've got all this stuff, and then also our categories. We have a lot of things here, and that's great, but it's also not very usable at this point. So let's make it a little bit more usable. And to do that, we can grab the different content in inside of the item. So let's actually look back at the item again. So print item, and we will see, if we print each item, we'll see that it's still a list. And if we just print out G data again, actually, so print out G data, print G data, we see it's a list. But if we print item and then contents of each item, so if we do that, we see that it's another list. It's sets of lists this time. So each item inside of there. So all of the elements that you'll see. So inside of info, we see that there are two things inside of this. So the children elements, or the child elements, are two things. So if we look at our list here, we've got one thing here, and keep scrolling down, and then we got the end of the one thing, and then if we have two things here, there we go. So that means that we have two different elements of these contents in here. So that's separating the child elements to this div. So we've got the h3 class and then the info section wrapper. So if we kind of go back, let's actually print out the context for each one. So if I did contents 0 and hit text, what should be expected is what's in the H3 class, what's in here, right? So everything that's in here is what's going to be coming out because we have 2 children for the info tag. So let's copy that, and we'll go back into terminal and print that out. And it's printing out the text for it, so let's actually get rid of text and see that it is the contents within there. I mean, I could already tell it's along those lines, but if we print out the actual context of it, it's going to print out on each one. So it starts out with H3, as we see here, and then H3 here, and then it goes through and it goes all the way down to this div class is also included in there. So it's getting this whole thing right here, right? So that's for the first one. And if we do the second one in the list of contents, we will see, I'm going to comment this one out, we'll see the second part of that data, which was the info for the address specifically. So we have info section, we have P class of address, and then all this stuff. And if you scroll up a little bit, you'll see all that other info. So let's actually look at the text there, because that is also kind of hard to read. So I'm going to copy that, and we see the text. Now it's actually separating the two. So if I printed the contents of that and the contents of that, just like that there, we see, okay, now it's saying, now they're separated. We have the some number, so the listing number, and then we have a name, and then we also have a menu. So it's actually pulling through and giving us that stuff. That's great. But what if we want data inside of this one right here? Like, let's say, for instance, we want to get just the name of the restaurant or the coffee place in this case. So I would come through here and kind of look at the different links that I've got for it. And the one I notice is there's one called class of business name. So there's a link of business name, and it links to something. This is going to probably link to the listing. Yes, it does link to the listing on Yellow Pages, and then it has some data analytics. But as you notice, I have a tag and then a class. So in here, I could even do find all again and get a tag of A, and then we're going to use that dictionary again, class, and then business name. So it's going to be this class, business name, and it's going to find all of them. In this case, it should only find one, so I could do 0. And I already know it's going to find one because it's just looking inside of this H3 class right here. It's not looking any further, right? So we saw that already with the divs. If we scroll back up, we would see that it's only going to be looking through that H class. So doing 0 would be that first element in the list, or we can just leave it off. Let's just leave it off so we can see what it looks like. Let's go ahead and do that, copy that, paste that in, and what we'll see is A class equals to name, and it ends the list right there, business name, and then there's another one at the very end that says business name, but it doesn't look like it has a link in it specifically, so this one might not work. So let's actually go, and since it's a list, each one has a list, we'll just get the first list element, so 0. I'm going to copy this and paste it in here. And now we see these list elements. So if I did .text again, I can see the text for that business name, and it's giving me all of them. As we see, now we have text actually for any specific business. This is great. So this means that now that I have this text, and I can also get the text from the address, I can see that, hey, look, here's the title, and here's the mess of an address that we still need to work with. So in this case, we can do the same type of thing that we did up here, but we want to do it for the address. So let's actually go ahead and look at the address, which, again, inside of the general data, we have these two elements, content 1 and content 2, or content 0 and content 1. So this is the one we're going to be looking at now. So if we open this up and we look at a couple things here, this first one, it has a class of rating. And if we look inside, it's hovered over, it says a.rating. That's not the one we want. We see p.itemScope, and we have a class of address. Hey, that's actually what we want. We want the address. So let's go ahead and grab that. So now I'll do find all and P, and then we'll do the class. And this one was ADR, so ADR. And we can say 0 again because it is the only element in there that has class of ADR within this one, right? So each one has the same thing, but there's only one paragraph element with the class of address inside of this div class of info section. So there's only one child element of p.adr inside of all this. So I can grab it like that, and we can do text again. So I can copy that and save it, and then we paste it in here. And there we go. So we have our address, we have our city, we have our state, and we have a zip code. But we don't have a phone number, so maybe we want to grab the URL class of phones. And what we see here is primary, so maybe we just want li of primary. So let's go ahead and copy this and do a li and then class primary. And basically now all it's doing is going to be looking for a list element in here that has a class of primary. So the list element could be in the A, it could be in the P, but in this case it's going to be in the phone. So I'm going to just say that it's that one. So we save this and we can print these out. Let's copy that again and paste it. And we see list index out of range. So if that comes to be an error, I'm just going to do a simple try and handle the exception by passing. So if there's the error, I'm just going to pass it. So this means basically if there's list index out of range, that means that it probably doesn't exist basically. So I can just do a try and a pass. So let's go ahead and copy that again. And that error goes away. And here I see the phone number, I've got the address, and I got the name of the business. And cool. So now it's actually starting to come together pretty nicely. But the address and the city are connected to each other. So let's actually change that. And if I look in my P, I see that there's a class of locality and then a address region and a postal code. And I also see item prop. So maybe I just want item prop, address, locality, region, and postal code. So let's go ahead and do that. So now I'm going to copy this, paste it down here, and look back in the code, and it's a span. So we're going to use the tag of span. And it's no longer a class, but item prop. So item prop. And then address locality. So address locality, and I'm just copying what they wrote here, right? So address locality, but I also need the postal address, so item prop address. So let's go ahead and copy this again, and item prop address. Okay, so that's the first one. Address will give me the list of the address, and then we want so actually let's try that out. That might give us duplicate information, so let's go ahead and try it out first. So copy this. We might get a list index error again, and we did. We got it actually really early, so let's do the try and accept again. So try, and then I'm just going to paste or move those forward. There we go. Copy this, paste it in here, and there we go. So looks like we might have an issue with how this is actually coming through because it's still not giving us the actual address. So I'm going to uncomment or comment out that first address one and see if the second one works. Address locality, and it's showing us Los Angeles, which is good. It's still giving us that other address. Oh, so we need to comment that one out. So let's try that once again. And now it's giving us the address locality, so it's giving us the city. We don't have the state yet, and we also don't have the actual street address yet. So let's look back in here and see where the street address might be. In this case, it doesn't have one, so let's actually go to one that does. So let's scroll down to one. Oops, accidentally hit the link on that. So this one, inspect element, we see now that, oh, here's one that has street address. So let's go back in here and I'm going to copy this try and accept and add this to street address. Right, so if it has a street address, it's going to print it. If it doesn't, it's not. And then we need address, region, and postal code, so we can just go ahead and let's make sure that that's written out correctly. I'm going to delete these commented out ones. All right, and then I'm going to copy this one of address locality to being, we want region, so change this locality to region. And then the last one is postal code, so we'll copy that and change this to postal code. Yeah, postal code, like that. All right, so now that we have this, we can now get all of the address information. So let's go ahead and copy this and paste it in here. And there we go. We have our name of our business, our street address, our locality. Unfortunately, it has a comma in the locality, so maybe we'd want to get rid of that. We have our state abbreviation and our postal code. So if we get rid of the locality, address, street address, locality, and then just hit dot replace and comma with comma, nothing. And we can run that one more time. Copy that and paste this in. There we go. All right, so that's it. Of course, now you can set these equal to variables. So like business name, business underscore name equals to that. And then we can use these variables and store them into functions and all that. But this is where I'm going to leave us. It's quite a bit of information of what we did, and there's a lot of trial and error stuff. But basically, you could go through and get every single data point on here and work through actually getting the code. Now, or the data, excuse me. Now, if you wanted to go to the next page, because only 30 listings are showing, we go to the next page. We see that the URL actually changes a little bit here. Up here, we see this one called page equals to 2. So if we copy this and go into looking at our URL, so URL page equals to 2, page 2 equals to this, what we see is it's essentially the base URL of that with one exception. This and page equals to. So if I did URL plus that, page equals to 2, well, I can make this even smarter, and I could add plus the string of 2 plus that string. I will now start to be able to programmatically put in integers here. So like I could use a function now and do define get URL or get data from URL. We could use the base URL of URL, and then we could use the number of pages we want to search, and then from here we would open it up to actually using that. But I'm not actually going to make that function, but just kind of showing you how to do it or get the idea of how to do it from there. So that is using scraping data with Beautiful Soup 4. I realize this was a really long one, but it's useful to kind of understand each element, and there's a lot more things that you can do with Beautiful Soup than what we showed here. And also keep in mind that it's not always going to work perfectly, because not every site is going to grab or save data in the same way, and it's also not always going to be laid out perfectly. One bad thing about using this and using it as a function versus trying to find an API for the same data is if they change their class names for anything, even if they change the class of business name to business name like that without the A, it's going to break all of our data, and it's going to take a bit of time to actually go back and find where the error is happening and how we can fix it and all that. So let me know if you have any questions on this, and yeah, thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any suggestions too for future videos. All right, we'll see you in the next one.